Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 1st of April, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar. It's continuing its rise, and we saw markets actually were fairly strong at the end of last week, a sea of green there. So, markets really shaking off any fears of trade wars with China and growth fears. So just that seems to be receding. The euro is still weak against the dollar. Against the yen, the US dollar is still looking strong. So that's really the bellwether to see the strength against the safe haven yen really shows the dollar strength. Sterling is still bearish below the cloud on the short-term chart. We've got a new downside target of 125.97. Let's say 126, that's 3.5% lower. Brexit is still weighing heavily on sterling. And if we look at the euro, we see sterling is weaker here as well, and against the Swiss franc too. Bitcoin was up. Is about 0.6% this morning, so a bit of a jump there, but really it's just a gradual improvement. We're not really seeing any clear signs of a new strong trend emerging. The market in the US was up on Friday, the S&P up 0.67%. So we're seeing here that the recovery is still well underway. Of course, we've got some way to go still to break the high that we saw last year. And so there is still always this risk of a lower high. And until we break that high, we can't be sure that the recovery is sustainable. The Nasdaq also looking stronger on Friday, and the Dow was up just 0.8%, so also looking pretty strong. The Russell 2000 has still not managed to get back above the short-term downtrend. So that is just an example of the smaller caps weighing more heavily. So we're seeing the blue chips is really where the recovery is being led. The futures are up sharply this morning. We've got the S&P future up 0.64% and the Nasdaq E-mini up just a touch under 1%. So it really does tell us that the US market is going to open quite sharply up today. The UK market is up 0.5% this morning, so that's looking strong, back into bullish territory on the short-term chart, and mid-caps up 0.5%, also just starting to look stronger. Not quite bullish yet, but given what we're seeing with the other markets breaking higher, that looks likely. The DAX is up over 1% this morning, the weaker euro having an impact there, and we're just seeing the DAX just emerging out of the cloud on the short-term chart, and the CAC 40 also looking pretty strong this morning. Japan was up 1.4%, so looking quite strong there, and the Hang Seng up 1.67% and breaking to new medium-term highs there, so we're looking quite strong. Interesting on the Hang Seng, the high was at the start of last year, and it really had a sell-off ever since then. We're now recovering quite strongly there, and China up 2.5%. The most significant thing is that China has activated this new upside targets. So that really does indicate that the worst, where we had all these big downside targets, those are now starting to come off the chart. Chinese stocks are recovering long term. That fear is receding as a result of that new upside target. Some 50% higher. The Sensex is up just under 1%, and that's surging, looking higher. The first market to really look like making new all-time highs, and that's looking pretty good. And the Aussie market was up 0.6%, so also looking good there as well. The sentiment is not just in equities. We're seeing Brent Crude up 1% this morning, WTI up 0.7%. And US nat gas up 0.75%, although that's not enough to change this downtrend. Gold, because we're seeing an improvement in sentiment, gold is coming off worse, and so we're seeing gold sitting at 12.89, so weakness increasing there, and silver also bearish below the cloud. US 10-year yields starting to recover a little bit off their lows. Hard to believe that they were as low as 2.35%. So we have seen now just a return to bullishness, but boy, oh boy, a very different picture from what we've seen over the last a couple of years. And German bond prices now just running out of steam as we're seeing that yield improvement. The price is just falling away there. This data coming to you from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock Zenith if you're a private user. Taking a look now at the stocks here, I'm using Yahoo Finance, so I get to see here my Yahoo prices coming in on the Yahoo Finance, and green across the board in the US, green in Europe and in Asia, except for the market in Taiwan and Indonesia, where we saw some small falls. Taking a look at the Dow, the best performer on Friday was Caterpillar. They were up 2.3%. Only one company down on Friday, and that was 3M. And looking at that chart, it is still quite weak long term. The relative has really done nothing for the past year. Taking a look at the Nasdaq 100, we see here we had some pretty big performances. Celgene up 7.8%. Not enough really to change the long-term picture, although we have activated a big upside target. But that break through resistance is probably quite good for Celgene. So some pretty big performances there. Micron up 5%, Western Digital up 5% as well. So we're seeing some big rises there. In the Aussie market, we're now seeing Aussie prices coming in still at this hour with the clocks having gone forward in the UK. And so Afterpay Touch, another feature, they've really been strong performers throughout, and they've outperformed the Dow Jones Index already this year by 50%. So an amazing performance there. Further upside potential of about 25% according to the targets. Big Cheese up 6.5%, not enough to change this chart, and Super Retail up 5.6%. Again, not enough to change the chart there. Looking at the downside, we've got Pilbara Minerals, they're down 6%, and Syrah Resources down 5%. Their woes continue. We often see them in the laggards board, and they've underperformed by 32% this year. So that's quite something. China, we saw a sea of green, nothing down in China, every stock up in the major index in Shanghai. Looking at the Indian market, we see the live prices coming in here now. Tata Motors up 7%. Hinduglue up 6%. Some pretty big performances here. Tata actually still not enough to change that chart though. Coming back to the downside, Indian Oil Corporation down 2.6%, but the medium-term chart looking a lot better. Z Entertainment, we've got downside targets here, still struggling, and a lot of resistance there. Look at that on that chart there. Moving across to Europe, if we look at the European market, we start with the FTSE 100. If we look at Antofagasta Group, down 3.6%. So that's looking pretty strong. Anglo-American 3.08%, and GVC Holdings 2.95%. So still looking pretty weak on the chart. On the downside, we've got Easyjet reporting weak summer numbers as a result of Brexit this morning. That's breaking to new lows. That's not great for Easyjet, the chart, with downside potential still around 15 and 13%. So we're seeing IAG, British Airways, coming down. Similarly, massively underperforming the market. So airline stocks really been hit this morning on that. TUI also hit last week with their announcement that the 737 crisis is hitting them. So we're seeing airlines being pretty badly hit this morning. Taking a look at the 250, the best performer in the 250 is Vivo Energy. They're up nearly 9% this morning. Pretty choppy chart though, so it's quite hard to see from that. CAS Minerals up 5%. But the long-term chart is still a little bit worrying there. And if we look at the downside, we've got Wizz Air Holdings down 1.7%. So again, falling away there. Taking a look at the European market, just looking across Europe, Volkswagen up 3% this morning, recovering some of their lost ground. Bayer also recovering some of their lost ground after the last couple of weeks of pretty bad moves. Daimler also up, and we're seeing BMW up as well, quite strongly, up 2%, but not enough to really change the picture here. So quite interesting that we're seeing those rises, but the general trend is still down. We've got Enel, they're weaker this morning, so we're seeing again that's weak, but the chart actually looking pretty strong as Enel's breaking to new highs. So that's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.